Hello again, I'm Greg. So we're going to continue not with the series on the hero, but with some commentaries about writing and fiction in general, and in this case, science fiction, which is dear to many hearts. It is very much a modern phenomena. H.G. Wells, Jules Verne, people like that are generally credited with inventing it. There may be the odd piece here and there before that, but it really came into its own in the 1890s and then into the 20th century. And the 20th century for science fiction, of course, was kind of a massive efflorescence of all kinds of topic styles and authorship. There is a continuum then from the very beginning, around 1890 to our own time. I want to explore that with you. Aptly, we are going to borrow from one of Star Trek's famous leitmotifs, and call this the Queue Continuum because we are waiting in line with science fiction. What are we waiting for? Let's find out. The drive to overcome apparent human limits is at the very heart of science fiction and related writing. Lovecraft himself puts it this way, quote, "I choose weird stories because they suit my inclination best. One of my strongest and most persistent wishes being to achieve, momentarily, the illusion of some strange suspension or violation of the galling limitations of time, space, and natural law, which forever imprison us and frustrate our curiosity about the infinite cosmic spaces beyond the radius of our sight and analysis." End quote. That, of course, is from a very famous essay of Lovecraft's Notes on Writing Weird Fiction from 1933. If art can be said to spark the imagination of science proper, figuring out how that very infinity actually works is a kindred project. What could appear as an impregnable castle wall might just be made of butter after all. The way into the breach might just be shown through the direction of literature before any methodical or systematic study of reality begins. Note that Lovecraft speaks not only of our senses, but more importantly, of our sensibilities. It is not only our sight, but also our analysis, which may be in the way of a grander and deeper vision. In opening our minds by way of imaginative narrative, the path to a more profound knowing of the cosmos might also appear before us. Nevertheless, the gap between the vision of science fiction, or that phantasmagorical or speculative, presents to us a waiting game. It can be seen in contrast to that between empirical discovery and practical application, which is another kind of wait, one that has fulfilled itself and now rests upon validated expectation. The edge of this seat is not so much filled by the imagination as it is by a lesser kind of anticipation, that of altering something already known to be in need of change. But before this wait begins, there is the much more amorphous and indefinite queuing up of our questions, our anxieties, our aspirations, and perhaps even of our shared destinies. Science fiction addresses face to face at first the limits of our human condition, and this, once again, in both our sensibilities and sensitivities. The one frames the kinds of questions we ask of the world and the mind. The other does the same to those directed at the conscience and the heart, which together combine to construct the very prison Lovecraft rails against. It is no error to regard such hitherto known limits to be galling, as he puts it, as this is a direct effect of the dead weight of history itself. And if history's greatest contribution is the overcoming of morality, the former can yet turn into the latter over time. For the past presents us with both a gift and a task. Human knowledge is, even if stochastically, cumulative and interrelated. Yes, we are aware of shifts, both of the vaunted paradigm, which occurs within specific discourses such as the sciences or even literary criticism, and those of the mode of production, a far more oceanic change that alters what history can itself be, and thence how it may be understood. We discover in between these levels, so to speak, the discursive shifts that affect the idea of what knowledge is in broad strokes. These have been famously analyzed by Michel Foucault. These orders of things alter when the combination of our sensibilities and our sensitivities are themselves shifted. In a way, this is a back reading, to be sure, but for the historical periods from which we do have such records, we understand those native to these times to be reacting, investigating, and remarking upon the very changes they themselves are living through. From alchemy to chemistry, from astrology to astronomy, from natural history to evolutionary biology, from Newtonian mechanics to that quantum, the examples are ready to hand. Less discreet, but nonetheless seismic, are the changes which can be observed in what we understand as art, or even as consciousness itself. With the advent of science fiction as a novel aspect of popular literature in the latter part of the 19th century, it is the widening of the aperture of the one which allows us to question the structure of the second. So when art opens up, we begin to get a better view of what our own consciousness might be like. Allegory has its genesis in antiquity, but its cast was mythic. Such denizens were not so much larger than life, but rather of another kind of life entirely, that there was understood to be a qualitative difference between humans and gods, stated plainly that one, this could never be bridged, and two, that the dual orders were ever to dwell in different worlds, and while contiguous, they were also often in opposition to one another. There was, in short, no line-up through which one could move from the mortal to the immortal, no manner of exceeding human limits, even if the allegories presented and enacted by the gods could teach some kind of lesson regarding the human fate. Fiction, by contrast, presents to us those like ourselves, gifted in some manner or oppressed, and its heroes gain the larger-than-life status not through their beings, but rather through their deeds. Each Promethean narrative now speaks to humanity alone, whether promoting our species evolutionarily or through a technical moral amalgam which cites a superior ethic of life. Such men as gods, to borrow from Wells, do not blink at the former chasm extant between existence annual and that perennial. Science fiction is the bridge to the overman. In the interim, we must pass time in the line by sharing these imaginative visions of just what it might be like. We do suspend our proverbial disbelief in however momentary a fashion, and we thus are quite content to queue up and thence at least ruminate. Akin to waiting at the gates of heaven, which are at once terrible and beautiful according to Genesis, we are, through the modern allegories science fiction enables, tasked with reflecting not only upon their own abilities, technical, sensible, or cognitive, but as well, and more importantly, the acts proceeding from our own conscience. Our very person is now at stake. Empathizing with this character or that, we know at once that their augmentation, however ostentatious or modest, is present in the fiction because there exists in reality an aspiration directed toward it. And this, in turn, however tacit or celebrated, is what will drive us forward to both reading about its goals and perhaps attempting to actually attain them. If art is generally said to be ahead of its time, an oxymoron on the face of it, we can at least nod to the sense that what is being presented through its reaches forward into an unknown, but not unknowable, future. And if futurity is itself an aspect of Dasign's own most being, indwelling alongside anxiety and resoluteness among others, it is part of our very essence to be ahead in the same manner as is accomplished by science fiction. The mirror image of anticipatory waiting is that imposed upon us by our shared finitudinal state and status alike. Even if we are not always running along towards death, we gradually become aware that all human limits are both present to us because we ourselves in our being are so limited. It is of our essence to be incomplete in both our projects and in our beings. Speculative literature extends in an oblique manner these limits, insofar as indefinite life is currently out of reach but may provide an out for the hero, while at once defying them. Science fiction includes the augmentation of life, echoing the modernist sensibility once defined as progress. But if its narratives seek to go beyond the merely technical, they as well suggest that there shall come some kind of existential epiphany, wherein the vision of a new form of life is proposed. One cannot be a whole-souled species patriot and admire science fiction, for instance. When James Kirk says to Spock that the whole universe is human, or something to that effect, certainly the Vulcan is insulted and immediately says so, but as well we are to envision not so much an overweening anthropism, but rather reflect upon the simple fact that all forms of conscious life must dwell in the same conditions, as well as arise from the same basic environs. On top of this, each such species, real or no, aspires and quests over against the same cosmic bastion. What gave rise to humanity also gives rise to everything else. This is the basis upon which we build our singular aspiration regarding communicating with such other forms of intelligent life as there may be. It is exceedingly old hat in genre that such contact be made through elementary mathematics, for in the cosmos basic nature is everywhere the same, as Sagan emphatically stated. One might be forgiven for the aside that suggests science fiction is part of a marginal sociality, that of the nerd, the geek, and the dork alone, not unlike its real-world siblings, such as cybernetics and AI. One's high school quarterback, with his trophy cheerleading homecoming princess at his lanky side, is apparently not the source of such visions. But as by far most of us are in fact geeks, science, both that fictional and that real, attains a political power, which in our late modernity provides the engine for an increasingly dense, and thus as well tense, form of human coexistence. It also contains the vast majority of human dreams, themselves upon a moving, almost inarticulate bridge over which this queue must pass, swaying as it does from anxiety to aspiration and back again. Speaking of why Robert Heinlein is the one sane man in science fiction, at least at that earlier time, Damon Knight suggests that it is the figure who gifts us with the vision of the perennial and the Promethean at once who is key, thereby affirming our own smaller quests, fragile yet intrepid, as they must be. Quote, Heinlein's greatest asset, I think, is this same perennial hero. Essentially, he is Heinlein himself, and Heinlein likes himself. This is a thing so rare in writers by necessity, who are insecure, self-critical men, that every now and then a writer by accident who has it, as Mark Twain did, cheerfully walks away with all of the prizes in sight. Unquote. That's from the 1956 essay In Search of Wonder. This character, no longer a god, but knowing what it might mean if she as a human were to become godlike, is but a reflection of that self-same humanity focused through the author, but in so doing retaining its broadest impetus, for the author is simply the vehicle for and spokesperson of our collective soul. Thank you.